The rain was not just falling. It was assaulting the city. Sheets of water crashed down, violent and furious, smearing the Manhattan streetlights into hazy orange streaks. Inside the nearly empty Moonlight Diner, Serena wiped down the last section of the counter, her whole body aching after 14 straight hours on her feet. The clock above the coffee machine crept past 2 in the morning. She wanted nothing more than to go home, soak her throbbing feet, and sink into a dreamless sleep before everything began again tomorrow. A hard gust of wind made the diner door shudder, the open sign swinging like it had gone mad. And then she saw the little girl, a small figure, curled in on herself beneath the narrow awning outside. At first, Serena thought it was only an illusion through rain-blurred glass. But then lightning split the sky, and she saw clearly. The girl was very young, maybe 10, shivering so badly her whole body trembled. A pink princess dress, the kind meant for a fancy birthday party, was plastered to her skin. Her sparkly jeweled ballet flats were caked with mud. One of them was gone entirely. The girl hugged herself tight, her face pale and streaked with tears, her black curls dripping onto the sidewalk. Serena's heart clenched. Her own problems, the stack of unpaid medical bills, the loneliness of her cramped studio apartment, suddenly felt small. Without thinking, she unlocked the door and stepped out. The bell chimed a bright, cheerful note, painfully out of place in the charged air. "Hey, you cannot stay out here. You will freeze to death." The girl flinched, her big eyes widening in fear, a fear far too deep for a 10-year-old, and not only because she was trapped in the storm. She tried to step forward and cried out in pain, her scraped knees buckling. Serena did not hesitate. She lunged out into the rain, the cold soaking through her uniform in an instant, lifted the girl up, and held her close. "It is okay now. I have got you." The girl, Sophia, was a bundle of chaos. Her teeth chattered so hard she could not form words, only clinging to Serena's neck as if terrified of being left behind. Serena moved fast. She grabbed the thick wool coat she kept for walking home, the only keepsake she still had from Mrs. Patterson, worn and frayed, but warm, and wrapped it tight around the small body. Then she made the richest hot chocolate she could manage, adding an entire handful of marshmallows. "Drink, slowly. It will warm you from the inside." While Sophia took tiny sips with shaking hands, her shivering began to ease. Serena knelt to check the injuries. Scraped knees, and on the bare sole of one foot, a small cut from a shard of glass. She cleaned the wounds gently, her movements practiced from the days she had cared for her foster mother. "You ran a long way, did you not? Who scared you like this?" She had just stood up to get bandages when Sophia's small hand shot out and grabbed her wrist. The grip was startlingly strong, full of panic. "Please," the girl whispered, her voice trembling. "Do not call the police." Serena went still. That was the first thing she had been taught to do in an emergency. But the terror in Sophia's wide brown eyes was real. This was not an ordinary lost child. This was the fear of someone running from something dangerous. "Why not, sweetheart? They can help you get home." Sophia shook her head fiercely, tears spilling again. "You do not understand. My dad is important. If this gets out, if the bad people find out where I am through a police report, they will find me. They will." She choked, unable to finish. "Someone is chasing me. I ran. I lost my phone. I did not know where else to go." Pieces clicked into place in Serena's mind. The expensive princess dress, even soaked, still looked like fine material. The shining pendant at Sophia's throat, real, not costume jewelry. The sheer intensity of her panic. Important and bad people. This was not just a rich kid who had wandered off. This was something far more dangerous. "All right," Serena decided, her voice gentle but firm. "No police, but I have to call your father. He is probably worried sick. Can you give me his number?" Sophia nodded, relief flooding her small, tear-stained face. She recited a string of numbers in a trembling whisper, as if it were a secret code. Serena drew in a deep breath, her heart pounding hard in her chest. She pulled out her old phone, with the cracked screen from the pocket of her apron. Every instinct told her this call would change everything. The air inside the diner thickened, charged with an energy she could not name. Then she dialed. The phone did not even have time to ring. It was answered on the very first beat, as if someone had been holding it, waiting, a finger hovering over the screen for hours. "Speak." The voice on the other end was a low, dangerous growl. Not a question, a command. The voice of someone used to being obeyed. The kind of voice that could silence an entire room with a single word. A voice carrying a whole universe of restrained fury, and the smoldering fear of a father losing the one thing he valued above all else. For a second, Serena forgot how to breathe. She tightened her grip on the phone until her knuckles went white. She heard other voices behind him, sharp and urgent, until he barked a single word that made them all fall silent. Quiet. Swallowing the lump in her throat, Serena found her own voice. It came out softer than she had meant, but clear and steady. My name is Serena. I am a waitress at the Moonlight Diner on Bleecker Street. Your daughter is here with me. A sharp inhale on the other end. Then silence. A heavy silence, suffocating in its weight. Sophia. He said his daughter's name, not as a question, but like a prayer, like confirmation of his deepest fear. Is she hurt? Serena's eyes went to Sophia, watching her with wide, hopeful eyes. Swallowed by the old wool coat, Serena wanted to paint a picture for this man, to make him understand not only that his daughter was safe, but how carefully she was being kept safe. She is safe, Serena repeated, her voice softening with a warmth she could not hold back. She is wrapped in the warmest coat I own, and she is drinking a cup of hot chocolate with marshmallows. She paused, determined to be completely honest. She has a few small scrapes. Her knees are scraped and she has a cut on her foot, but it is not serious. She is shaking from the cold and fear, but she is very brave. She is right here beside me, and she is okay. The silence on the other end deepened. It was no longer the silence of a predator waiting to strike, but the silence of a storm finally breaking. The silence of a father being pulled back from hell. When Marcus spoke again, his voice had changed. The sharp edge of danger was still there, but now it was covered by something raw, vulnerable, something Serena knew he rarely showed anyone. Tell her. The words caught on emotion, his voice turning rough. Tell her that Papa is coming. Stay on the line. Do not hang up. If this story touches your heart, please press like to support the channel. Do not forget to share it with the people you love, and subscribe so you do not miss the next moving stories. Serena passed Marcus's words on to Sophia, her voice gentle, the way you soothe a frightened child. Papa is coming to get you. That is what he said. The girl's wide brown eyes brightened. For the first time since she had stepped into the diner, something other than fear rose in her gaze. Hope, trust, the kind of safety only a father can bring. Sophia nodded and tucked herself deeper into the old wool coat, breathing in the warm scent of the fabric as if it were a life preserver in the middle of a night sea. Serena kept the phone to her ear, just as Marcus had ordered. She could hear everything happening on his end. Quick, decisive footsteps striking a hard surface, a car door slamming shut, an engine roaring to life, powerful and savage, like a beast finally released from its chain. Then Marcus's voice came again, no longer speaking to her, but issuing commands to someone in a language that sounded sharp and final. Serena did not understand the Italian words, but she understood the tone. It was the voice of a man accustomed to holding the power of life and death, accustomed to absolute obedience, and now focusing all of that force on one single purpose: getting his daughter back. Outside, the storm was still screaming. Rain lashed the windows as if it meant to break in. Thunder rolled somewhere in the distance, and Sophia curled in on herself every time the sound came closer. Serena set the phone down on the counter and switched to speaker so the line would stay open, then sat beside the girl. She drew Sophia into her arms as naturally as breathing, as if she had done this 1,000 times. Her hand rubbed small circles on the child's back, steady and rhythmic. "Tell me," Serena said, her voice low and soft. "What happened to you?" Sophia stayed quiet for a long time. Then fragments began to spill out, scattered and uneven, like raindrops sliding down glass. "I went to Madison's birthday party. Madison is my best friend at school. Papa let me go. But only if Tony came with me. Tony is my bodyguard. But I wanted to be normal like the other kids. I did not want someone following me all the time. So I slipped out the back door when Tony was not looking." Serena listened without interrupting, without judging. She understood that feeling. She understood the longing to be normal, to fit in, to live the way other children lived. She had been that child once, in cold orphanages, always aching to belong somewhere. "I just wanted to walk home by myself," Sophia went on, her voice trembling. "Home is not far. I know the way. But then a black car started following me. Slowly. It just kept following me. I got so scared. I started running. I ran as fast as I could. I do not know how long I ran, or how far. I lost my phone. I lost my shoe. And then it started raining and I did not know where to go." Tears slid down Sophia's cheeks again. Serena held her tighter, feeling the small body shaking in her arms. "You are safe now," she whispered. "You were very brave. You did the right thing by running, and now you are safe. Your father is coming." Through the open line, Serena could still hear the engine's growl, Marcus's voice cutting in now and then, asking, "How much longer?" Sharp with impatience, and someone answering, "5 minutes, sir, 5 minutes." Serena looked out through the glass, where the rain still poured without mercy. She did not know who the man on the other end of the call truly was. She did not know how dangerous his world might be, but she knew one thing. He loved his daughter. A love so absolute, so fierce. It could burn the whole world if it had to. Then she saw it. Headlights slicing through the rain, harsh and blinding. Not one, many. They advanced like an army in the night, and Serena's heart began to beat faster. Sophia lifted her head, her eyes fixed on the glass. "Papa," she whispered. 3 glossy black SUVs slid through the curtain of rain like enormous ghosts, stopping directly in front of the diner with frightening precision. They did not park neatly like ordinary cars. They cut across the street, blocking it completely, forming a wall of steel between the outside world and the small restaurant. The engines died almost at the same moment, and in that instant there was only the storm, the rain screaming into a silence that felt like a threat. Car doors opened. Men stepped out, one by one, like parts of a machine programmed to perfection. Serena counted 6. No, 7. All of them tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in black suits like a uniform, moving with the measured stride of trained men. Not ordinary hired bodyguards, not corporate security. This was something else entirely. They fanned into formation around the middle vehicle, eyes sweeping the dark street, hands resting where Serena knew weapons were hidden. They did not run. They did not hurry, but every step carried restrained death. Serena's heart hammered in her chest. She tightened her grip on Sophia's hand, drawing the girl closer, without even realizing she was doing it. These were not normal people. This was the kind of thing Serena had only seen in movies, in stories about the underworld people spoke about in whispers. And the man she had just called, the father of the child sitting in her arms, clearly stood at the top of that world. Part of her wanted to be afraid, to shrink back, to run. But Sophia clung to her hand, and those brown eyes were no longer filled with fear. They were bright now, overflowing with joy and anticipation. To the little girl, this was not a terrifying army. This was her father's army. This was safety. The door of the middle SUV opened, and the world seemed to stop turning. Marcus Valente stepped out, and at once Serena understood why those men obeyed him without question. He was tall, taller than everyone around him, broad-shouldered beneath a long black coat now soaked by the rain. His black hair, streaked with a few strands of silver at the temples, was plastered to his forehead, but it did nothing to diminish the authority that radiated from him. His face was angular, the lines sharp as if carved from granite, and utterly expressionless. Cold, hard, dangerous. A faint scar ran across his left eyebrow, and his dark brown eyes swept the street with the look of a predator assessing its territory. He did not need to look at his men. A slight nod was enough, and 2 of them moved immediately toward the diner door, taking positions on either side like stone statues. The others spread out, sealing the area, turning the small diner into an impregnable fortress. Marcus advanced. Rain poured over him, and he did not seem to notice. His stride was long and decisive, each step as if measuring the distance between him and his daughter. The light from inside the diner fell across his face as he came closer, and Serena could see more clearly. His jaw locked tight, his cheekbones rigid, and in those cold eyes, deep beneath the ice, a fire was burning. The fire of fear, of desperation, of a love so fierce it could scorch the world. The diner door opened, the bell chiming, painfully out of place in the heavy air. Marcus Valente stepped inside, and the room seemed to shrink around the force of his presence. Marcus stopped in the middle of the diner, and his dark brown eyes swept the space in a single heartbeat. Past the empty tables, past the silent counter, past the old coffee machine. Then that gaze fixed on the last booth at the back, where a small figure sat wrapped in an oversized wool coat, wide eyes locked on him, and the mask collapsed. Serena watched it happen right in front of her, as if someone had torn down a curtain. The stone-cold face of Marcus Valente, the face of a boss, of a man who held the power of life and death, shattered into 1,000 pieces. Pain came first, sharp and ruthless. The pain of hours spent not knowing whether his daughter was alive or dead. Then relief, crashing in like a tidal wave, pulling his broad shoulders down, choking his breath. Those dark eyes, cold and frightening only seconds ago, now shimmered with a light Serena knew he never let anyone see. Love, pure, and so fierce it almost burned. "Papa!" Sophia's cry split the air. She sprang up from the booth, the wool coat slipping to the floor, and hurled herself toward her father like a tiny bullet. Bare feet, scraped knees, a wrinkled princess dress. Nothing could stop her. Marcus moved at the same time. He did not walk. He surged forward, dropping to his knees on the diner floor, without caring about the expensive coat or the way his knees struck the cold tile. He opened his arms wide, and Sophia flew into them as if into heaven. Marcus's arms closed around his daughter, holding her so tightly it was as if he meant to press her into his chest, as if he could shield her from everything cruel in this world by force alone. Sophia sobbed, the sobs of a child who was finally safe, burying her face in her father's neck, small hands clenched in his collar. And Marcus, the terrifying Mafia Boss, the man who could make an entire city tremble, was trembling too. His whole body shook, and Serena could see his shoulders quiver with each breath he fought to hold in. "Piccola mia," Marcus whispered in Italian, his voice rough. "Bambina mia, il mio cuore." Serena did not understand the words, but she understood the meaning. These were the words of a father, in pain and gratitude, holding the most precious thing in his life after nearly losing her. Words she had never heard anyone speak to her, and her heart tightened with a strange feeling. Not envy, a longing, and something that felt a little like joy. Simply from witnessing that such beautiful love could exist in the world. Marcus loosened his hold gently, his large hands lifting his daughter's small face, his thumbs wiping the tears from her cheeks. His eyes moved over every detail, checking, assessing. Then he looked down. Scraped knees, a bare foot with a cut that had already been bandaged. His jaw tightened, and for an instant something dangerous flashed in his eyes. Rage, cold and merciless. Someone had hurt his daughter, and someone would pay. But then, Sophia spoke, her voice still broken with sobs. "Papa, I am sorry. I did not listen. I slipped away by myself. Shh." Marcus pulled her back into his arms, his chin resting on the top of her head, his eyes closing. "We will talk later. Right now it does not matter. Nothing matters. You are safe. You are here with Papa." They held each other like that in the quiet diner while the rain still screamed outside. Serena stepped back, feeling as if she were intruding on something far too private. She turned away, meaning to clear the cup of hot chocolate that had gone cold, to give them more space. But then she felt that look, heavy, piercing, fixed straight on her. Marcus Valente had lifted his head, and for the first time, he truly looked at her. That gaze pinned Serena in place. She could not move. She could not turn away. She could not even breathe. Marcus Valente was looking at her, and in all 28 years of her life she had never felt so seen through. Not the casual glance of a customer, not the indifferent look of people she passed every day. This was something else entirely. Penetrating, razor sharp, as if he were reading every page of the book of her life with a single look. Those dark brown eyes moved slowly, without hurry, without embarrassment. From her chestnut brown hair still soaked with rain, strands clinging to her cheeks and forehead, down to a face gone pale from too little sleep, light green eyes shadowed underneath yet steady, refusing to flinch under his stare. Down to her old waitress uniform, faded after too many washes, still damp across her shoulders and chest from the moment she had run into the storm to save Sophia. Down to her thin hands, the fingers rough and calloused from work, gripping a wiping cloth like an invisible weapon. Down to her shoes, soles worn thin, the right one split at the toe with a small tear she could not afford to fix. He saw everything. Serena knew it. He saw the poverty stamped into every detail. He saw the hard life carved into the lines of her face. He saw the exhaustion after 14 hours standing. She was used to the scornful looks from people with money, used to being seen as less than human. She braced herself for it, but it did not come. In Marcus's eyes there was no contempt, no cheap pity, only a pure, measured assessment, and something else Serena could not name. A small flicker, as if he had found something unexpected, something that caught his attention. Marcus rose, the motion surprisingly smooth for a man so large. Sophia still clung to her father's neck, and he lifted her with ease, one arm supporting her beneath, the other still holding her close. She looked tiny in his arms, like a nestling sheltered by enormous wings. Sophia had stopped crying now, her head resting on his shoulder, eyelids heavy with exhaustion and safety. Marcus walked toward Serena, and she had to tilt her head back to look at him. He was nearly 20 centimeters taller than she was, and at this distance his presence felt like a wall. Overwhelming, powerful, but not threatening. At least, not to her. "You are Serena." His voice was low and deep, not a question but a confirmation, as if he had known her name for a long time, as if he had carved it into memory the moment she had spoken it on the phone. Serena nodded, her throat dry. Yes. Marcus paused for a beat. Then he said it. Only 2 words. But those words were heavy as a mountain, deep as the sea, carrying the weight of a vow. Thank you. Serena had heard those 2 words countless times in her life. From customers when she brought out food. From strangers when she picked up something they dropped. Familiar words, ordinary words, sometimes empty. But when Marcus Valente said them, they were no longer ordinary. They carried the weight of a life, of a father who had just been given back his only child, of a quiet promise that he would never forget what she had done tonight. I only did what anyone would do, Serena said, her voice smaller than she wanted. Marcus tipped his head slightly, and something passed through his eyes. Almost sadness. No, he said. Not everyone would. Marcus shifted Sophia onto one arm and extended his free hand toward Serena. A simple gesture. A handshake. Something she had done thousands of times in her life. With customers, with strangers, with faces she never remembered. But this hand was different. This hand belonged to the man whose mere arrival had silenced an entire street. This hand could command an empire. And this hand was waiting for her. Serena hesitated. Only a heartbeat. Something in her instincts was screaming, warning her that if she touched that hand, everything would change. That this was not just a polite exchange. That this was a threshold. And once she stepped over it, she would not be able to step back. But she reached out anyway. Her fingers met Marcus's palm, and the world detonated. A jolt of electricity. There was no other way to describe it. A surge of warmth, fierce and trembling, shot up from the point of contact, racing along her arm, spreading through her whole body like fire in her veins. Serena stopped breathing. Her heart skipped 1 beat, and then started again. Faster, harder, almost painful. Her skin prickled, her knees went weak, and she could not move, could not pull away, could only stand there, trapped in a moment where time did not exist. Marcus's hand closed around hers, warm, powerful, and shaking. Her eyes widened as she looked up at him, and she saw it. Marcus had gone rigid too. His dark eyes were wider, his pupils blown, and in that stare was a shock he could not hide. He felt it, the same current, the same sudden blaze, the same unexplainable thing sparking between 2 complete strangers in a small diner at 2 a.m. They stared at each other. No one spoke. No one needed to. Language became useless when the body was saying everything. Serena could feel Marcus's pulse through the contact of their hands, fast and strong, nothing like the calm of his cold exterior. And she knew he could feel hers too, could hear the way her heartbeat was screaming inside her chest. The moment stretched. 1 second, 2, maybe a lifetime. Then Sophia shifted in her father's arms, and the bubble burst. Marcus blinked, as if waking from a trance. He let go of Serena's hand, slowly, almost unwillingly. Serena dropped her arm to her side, but her skin still tingled, still held the imprint of his hand like a brand. We have to go, Marcus said, his voice a little rougher than before. She needs rest. Serena nodded, not trusting herself to speak. Marcus turned and headed for the door. His men already had the car door open, waiting, but before he stepped back into the rain, Sophia lifted her head from her father's shoulder, her wide brown eyes searching for Serena. Goodbye, Serena, she called, waving, her voice weak but warm. Thank you for the warm coat. And the marshmallows. Serena tried to smile, even though her lips were trembling. Goodbye, Sophia. Take care of yourself. Marcus paused for a beat and looked back at Serena one last time. That gaze said more than 1,000 words. Then he stepped outside, and the rain swallowed the tall shape of him and the small girl in his arms. The car door shut, the engines roared, and the black convoy slid away, vanishing into the night as if it had never been there. Serena stood alone in the empty diner. The doorbell's chime still seemed to hang in the air. The hot chocolate sat cold on the table. A small puddle marked the spot on the floor where Sophia had been sitting, and Serena's hand, her right hand, was still warm, still trembling, still remembering the feel of his grip. Then she realized it. The coat. Mrs. Patterson's old wool coat. The only keepsake Serena had left of her late foster mother. Sophia had still been wearing it when Marcus carried her out. It had gone with them. Serena stared out through the glass, where the rain kept pouring without end, and she did not know whether she should cry or laugh. She had just lost the most precious thing she owned, but strangely, she did not feel pain, only a deep, bone-level intuition that she would see that coat again. She would see that little girl again. She would see that man again, and that certainty frightened her more than anything. On the first day, Serena woke up and wondered if it had all been a dream. She lay on the narrow bed in her cramped studio apartment, staring up at a ceiling stained with damp spots, trying to convince herself there had been no stormy night at all. No little girl in a princess dress. No black convoy. No man with dark brown eyes that could see straight through a soul. But then she lifted her right hand, looked into her palm, and the feeling was still there, warm, trembling, as if her skin had permanently memorized the imprint of his hand. She went to work at the diner like she always did, smiling at customers, pouring coffee, wiping tables, taking the small tips. But every few minutes her eyes drifted to the door. Every time the bell chimed, her heart jumped. Every black car that slid past the window stole her breath, waiting, hoping, then disappointed when it was not him. By the end of the day, she scolded herself for that foolishness. Who was he? A mafia boss, the owner of an entire underground empire. And who was she? A broke waitress with debts stacked to the ceiling. Why would he come back? And why did she want him to? On the second day, reality came down on her like a slap. When she opened her mailbox, Serena found a white envelope with the hospital logo printed in the corner. She did not even need to open it to know what it was. A demand letter. The third one this month. $5,000. The remaining balance from Mrs. Patterson's hospital bills. The only foster mother who had ever loved her. The woman who had held Serena's hand until her final breath on a hospital bed 2 years earlier. Serena had paid half of it, with sweat and tears, with endless extra shifts, with skipping breakfast for 6 months. But the remaining $5,000 still hovered over her head like a death sentence. The interest kept rising. The deadline kept closing in, and she did not know what to do. She came into the diner like a sleepwalker, dark circles under her eyes, her steps heavy. Frank, the owner, watched her with worry from behind the counter. He was a 55-year-old man with gray hair and kind eyes, the one who had given her this job when no one else would hire an orphan girl with no experience. He did not say anything. He simply set a bowl of hot soup in front of her during her lunch break. "Eat, kid." His voice was warm. "You are getting too thin." Serena tried to smile, tried to swallow each spoonful past the bitterness in her throat. She did not cry. She had forgotten how to cry a long time ago. On the third day, Serena made a decision. Forget everything. Forget that stormy night. Forget the little girl with wide brown eyes. Forget the man with the warm hand. Their world and her world were separated by an entire universe. He lived in a mansion with bodyguards, with luxury cars and power. She lived in a 15-square-meter apartment with roaches and rats, with sleepless nights worrying about rent. Meeting him had been an accident, a brief moment in the current of life. He had probably forgotten her the instant the convoy left the street. And she should forget too. She had to. Serena repeated it like a spell as she wiped tables, as she poured coffee, as she counted her tips at the end of the day. Forget. But every time she closed her eyes, she saw those dark brown eyes watching her. Every time she touched anything, she remembered the feel of his hand. And every night, lying alone in the dark, she lifted her right hand to her chest, where her heart kept beating in rhythms she could not control. 3 days, 72 hours, 4,320 minutes, and she still could not forget. On the afternoon of the third day, the Moonlight Diner was strangely quiet. Only one customer sat in a far corner, absorbed in a newspaper beside a cup of coffee that had gone cold. Serena stood behind the counter with a wiping cloth in her hand. But she was not really wiping anything. She was simply standing there, her eyes dull as she stared through the glass, where weak late-afternoon sunlight slanted through bare branches. She had decided to forget. She had told herself hundreds of times that it was over. So why did her heart still stumble every time she heard an engine outside on the street? Then she heard it. An engine, not like the taxis or buses that passed all day. Smoother, stronger, familiar in a way that made no sense. Serena lifted her head, and her heart stopped. A black car pulled up right in front of the diner, not 3 like that night. Just one. And the man who stepped out of the driver's seat was not a bodyguard, not a chauffeur. It was him, Marcus Valente, alone. She froze where she stood, the cloth slipping from her fingers without her noticing. Marcus walked into the diner, the doorbell ringing and echoing in the quiet room, and Serena could do nothing but stare at him. He looked different from that night. No long black coat drenched in rain, no ice-cold face of a man ready to burn the world. Today he wore black slacks and a simple gray shirt, the top button open, sleeves rolled to his elbows. Still elegant, still powerful. But there was something softer in him now. Something closer. More human. And in his hands, Serena saw the old wool coat, folded carefully and neatly, and beside it a small gift box wrapped in plain brown paper. Marcus walked toward the counter, and the distance between them shrank with every step. Serena wanted to say something, to greet him, to ask why he was here, but her throat was dry and her lips felt glued together. All she could do was stand there, looking up at him with wide eyes, her heart pounding hard in her chest. Marcus stopped one step from her. His dark brown eyes held hers, and this time there was no cold appraisal like before. Something warmer lived in that look, something almost gentle. "Serena," he said her name, and in the low warmth of his voice it sounded like music. "Mr. Valente," she whispered, finally finding her voice. One corner of Marcus's mouth lifted, almost a smile. "Marcus," he corrected. "Call me Marcus." Before she could react, he set the wool coat on the counter, right in front of her. Mrs. Patterson's old coat, the keepsake she thought she had lost. But now it was here, folded crisp to every line, clean, and carrying a faint scent of lavender that she was certain had never been there before. "Sophia would not let go of it for 2 days, Marcus said, his voice low and quiet. "She told me the smell made her feel safe. I had to promise I would bring it back to you before she would let me take it to be washed." Serena touched the coat, her fingers trembling. She looked up at him, her eyes burning. "Thank you. Thank you, Marcus." She corrected herself, and his name on her tongue held a strange sweetness. Marcus nodded, then placed the small gift box beside the coat. "I came to return what belongs to you," he said, "and there is a small gift, to thank you for that night." Serena looked at the small gift box on the counter, then back at Marcus. She was not used to receiving gifts. She could not remember the last time anyone had given her anything. Maybe it had been Mrs. Patterson, a hand-knitted scarf on the last Christmas before she learned she was sick. After that, there had been no one. No gifts, no kindness, only bills and loneliness. "I cannot take it," Serena shook her head. "You already thanked me. That night, I do not need anything else." Marcus looked at her, patient. "Open it," he said. His voice was not a command. It was almost a plea. "If you open it and still do not want it, I will not force you." Serena hesitated for a long time. Then, with hands that trembled slightly, she reached for the box. The brown paper was plain, with no bright bow or ribbon. She peeled it back carefully, as if afraid she might damage something precious inside. When the lid came off, Serena stopped breathing. Resting on black velvet was a pair of leather gloves. A warm brown, the same shade as Mrs. Patterson's coat. She touched them, and her fingers nearly sank into a softness she could not believe. These were not the kind of gloves she had ever seen in bargain stores. This was real leather, tanned and finished by skilled hands, the kind she had only dared to look at through the glass of expensive shops. But what tightened her chest was not their price. It was the care behind them. This was not cash, not meaningless, expensive jewelry, not the kind of luxury rich people used to show off. These were gloves, practical, warm, for someone who worked in a cold diner through winter, who walked home in biting wind, who endured the skin-cutting cold of late nights. Marcus had seen her calloused hands. He had seen her fingers reddened by the cold, and he had chosen something she truly needed. Tears rose in Serena's eyes, and she had to blink again and again to keep them from falling. "How did you know?" she whispered, her voice catching. "I saw it," Marcus answered simply. "That night. Your hand was freezing when it touched mine, and the gloves in your coat pocket were torn to pieces." She did not know what to say. No one had ever noticed those small details about her. No one had ever cared enough to see what she tried to hide. But Marcus had seen. In those few minutes that night, he had seen more than anyone had ever seen in all 28 years of her life. "Thank you," she said. And those 2 words carried the weight of her whole heart. Marcus nodded, and the air between them softened. He glanced at the wool coat still lying on the counter, then back at her. "Sophia keeps asking about you," he said. "She wants to know if Serena is okay, if Serena still makes hot chocolate with marshmallows. She even drew pictures of that night." A small smile touched his mouth, the first Serena had seen, and it changed his face completely. Less frightening, warmer, like the father he truly was. "She said this coat smells like her mother, like safety, like being loved." Serena's heart tightened. She looked down at the coat, her fingers stroking the worn wool. "It was my foster mother's," she said, her voice barely above a breath. "Mrs. Patterson. She was the only person who ever really loved me." She paused, swallowing hard. "She died 2 years ago. Cancer. This coat is the only thing I have left of her." Silence. A heavy, deep silence wrapped around them. Serena did not dare lift her head, afraid he would see the tears waiting in her eyes. But then she felt a hand touch her hand, gentle, and she looked up. Marcus was watching her, and in those dark brown eyes she did not see pity. She saw understanding, the empathy of someone who had lost the person he loved most. He was a widower too. He knew what loss was. And in that moment, the wall between the powerful mafia boss and the broke waitress collapsed completely. "I understand," Marcus said, only 2 words. But they carried the weight of an entire universe. And Serena believed him, believed that he truly did understand. Marcus did not leave. Instead, he glanced around the diner, then walked to a booth near the window and sat down. Serena stood there, stunned, unsure what to do. She had assumed he would return the coat, offer a few polite words, and disappear back into his world of wealth the way he had before. But he was sitting there, at ease, as if this were a familiar coffee shop he visited every day, and he was looking at her with a patient, waiting expression. "May I order coffee?" Marcus asked, and the plainness of the question made Serena let out a small laugh at the absurdity of it. A mafia boss sitting in her cheap diner, asking for a cup of coffee like any ordinary customer. "Of course," she nodded, moving toward the coffee machine. "How do you take it?" "Black. No sugar, no cream." She poured the coffee into a white ceramic mug, her hands still shaking a little. When she carried it to the booth, Marcus pointed to the seat across from him. "Sit," he said, "unless you are busy." Serena looked around. The customer reading the newspaper in the far corner was gone, sometime without her noticing. The diner was completely empty. Frank was in the kitchen, prepping for the evening shift. She had no reason to refuse. She sat down, back straight, hands folded neatly in her lap. Awkward, unsure, not knowing where to look. "How long have you worked here?" Marcus asked, taking a sip of coffee. 10 years, Serena said. "Frank, the owner, gave me this job when I aged out of the foster system. No one else would hire an 18-year-old girl with no experience and no one to vouch for her. 10 years is a long time." "Yes," she nodded, "but I like it here. Frank is good to me, the job is steady, and I am used to it." She did not mention her aching legs after every 14-hour shift. She did not mention the soreness in her back from standing too long. She did not mention the late nights walking home, so exhausted she could not even be bothered to eat dinner. But somehow, Marcus seemed to read all of it anyway. "How long are your shifts?" he asked. 12 to 14 hours. Depends on the day." Marcus's jaw tightened. "That is too much." Serena shrugged. "I need the money." Silence stretched between them, but not the uncomfortable kind. Marcus watched her, his gaze deep, as if he were trying to read pages she kept hidden. "What about your family?" he asked. "Other than your foster mother who passed away." The question landed like a knife in an old wound. Serena drew a slow breath. "It is just me," she said, her voice light as a passing wind. "I never knew my birth parents. I was abandoned at the hospital the day I was born. I grew up in orphanages. I was adopted 3 times. I was returned all 3 times. She paused, looking down at the tabletop. "Mrs. Patterson adopted me when I was 15. She was the only one who kept me, and now she is gone too, so yes. It is just me." Marcus said nothing for a long time. Then he set his coffee down and looked straight into her eyes. "Sophia has only me too," he said, his voice lower. "My wife Isabella died 4 years ago, a congenital heart condition. She hid it from me for years, because she did not want me to worry." A flicker of pain moved through his dark eyes. One morning, she did not wake up. Sophia was only 6. Serena felt her heart pinch. "I am sorry." "Do not." Marcus shook his head. "I do not need pity. I just want you to understand." He paused, his gaze drifting. "Sophia is exactly like her mother. The black curls, the wide brown eyes, even the personality. She loves to draw. She is afraid of thunder, and she cries when she watches sad movies." A small smile touched his mouth, the smile of a father thinking of his child. She misses her mother so much, especially on stormy nights, because Isabella used to hold her to sleep whenever there was thunder and lightning. Suddenly, the phone in Marcus's pocket began to vibrate, then vibrate again. Then it kept vibrating, hard and relentless, as if dozens of calls were coming in at once. Serena glanced at his pocket, where the screen glow flashed again and again. She knew he was a busy man. She knew he ran an empire. She braced herself for him to apologize and leave. But Marcus simply reached into his pocket, pulled the phone out, and shut it off completely. The screen went black. The vibration stopped, and he placed the phone face down on the table, as if it mattered less than this conversation. "Go on," Marcus said, watching her. "I want to hear more about you." Serena stared at him, too shocked to speak. The most powerful man in the city had just turned off his phone. For her, to give her time. A waitress in a cheap diner. And in that moment, she knew Marcus Valente was unlike anyone she had ever met. They talked until the sunset outside the windows stained the sky red. Serena could not remember the last time she had talked this much with anyone. She told him about the books she read on sleepless nights, about her small dream of opening a cozy bakery, about the flowers she grew on the sill of her cramped apartment window. And Marcus listened, truly listened. Not the polite kind of listening, eyes drifting elsewhere, head nodding on autopilot, the kind of listening that made her feel as if she were the most important person in the world. Then the clock on the wall struck 6, and Frank came out of the kitchen to signal that Serena's shift was over. She stood, awkward, not knowing what to say. Marcus stood too, leaving a few bills on the table, more than 10 times the price of a cup of coffee. "I will walk you to your car," he said. Not an offer, but a simple fact. Serena wanted to refuse. She wanted to say it was not necessary, that she could manage, that he had already spent too much time here. But when she looked into those dark brown eyes, she could not make any words come. She only nodded, took the wool coat and the box with the gloves, and stepped outside. The late afternoon air was cool, carrying the smell of dry leaves and the damp warning of rain to come. Serena led Marcus to the corner where her old car was parked, a 1992 Toyota Corolla. The paint faded, a dent in the right door she could not afford to fix. It sat there small and sad beside Marcus's sleek black Maserati. The contrast was so sharp it almost hurt. 2 worlds, 2 lives, separated by a chasm that could not be crossed. Serena stopped beside her car and turned back to Marcus. "Thank you," she said quietly. "For everything. For the coat. For the gift. For this afternoon." Marcus did not answer right away. He stood there, tall and silent, the sunset light falling across his angular face and softening its hard lines. His eyes held hers, deep and unreadable, as if weighing something that mattered. Then he stepped closer. 1 step, 2, until the space between them was only a few inches. "You live a hard life, Serena," Marcus said, his voice low, like a cello in an empty room. "You work 14 hours a day. You carry a debt that is not yours. You face everything alone, with no one beside you." He paused, and what he said next made her heart stop. "You deserve to be loved." Serena could not breathe, could not move, could do nothing but stand there, staring up at him with wide eyes. Marcus lifted his hand, slowly, gently, as if he were afraid of startling her. His fingers touched her cheek, brushed aside, a loose strand of hair the wind had blown forward, and tucked it behind her ear. The touch was as light as a butterfly, but it burned her skin like fire. Serena shivered, and she knew he felt it, because his fingers stilled, resting softly against her cheek. They were close enough that she could feel the warmth of his body. Close enough to catch the scent of expensive cologne mixed with wood and coffee. Close enough that when she lifted her face, their mouths were only a few centimeters apart. Serena's heart was hammering so wildly she feared he could hear it. Her breathing turned quick, shallow, trembling. She looked into Marcus's eyes and saw something there. Want, tenderness, and a restraint on the verge of breaking. Marcus dipped his head. Closer, closer still. Then he stopped, a breath away from her lips. His dark eyes searched hers, reading every emotion, every thought, every panicked beat of her heart. And he stopped. Not because he did not want to. Serena could see that he did. She could feel the hunger in every tense line of his face. But he still stopped. "I will see you again, Serena," Marcus whispered, his voice rough, as if each word took effort. Then he stepped back. 1 step, 2. His hand left her cheek, and the cold emptiness rushed in where his warmth had been. He turned and walked toward the Maserati, and Serena could only stand there watching, her feet nailed to the ground. The car door opened. Marcus got in. The engine growled, and the car slid away, vanishing at the end of the street. Serena stood alone in the dying sunset, her lips still trembling, her cheek still burning where he had touched her. "I will see you again," she whispered back, and those words sounded like a promise. 3 days passed like 3 centuries. Serena went to work. She served customers. She wiped tables. She poured coffee. And she tried not to think about Marcus Valente. She failed, miserably. Every night, lying in bed, she touched her cheek, the place his fingers had brushed. Every morning, when she woke, she wondered whether "I will see you again" had truly been a promise, or just the kind of polite words rich people said to each other. She had almost convinced herself it was the second, that Marcus had forgotten her the moment the Maserati disappeared. that she had been nothing more than a passing moment in his busy life. Then her phone vibrated. It was the evening of the third day. Her shift had just ended. She was sitting on her bed, too tired to even change her clothes. Her screen lit up. A text from an unknown number. Only a few short words. No greeting. No explanation. Ready in 10 minutes. M. Serena's heart stopped for a beat. Then it started again. Fast and hard. So loud she could hear it in her ears. M. Marcus. He had not forgotten her. He was coming. In 10 minutes. She sprang off the bed like she had been shocked. 10 minutes. She only had 10 minutes. She rushed into the bathroom, washed her face, brushed her hair, and pulled on the only clean dark blue knit dress left in her closet. No time for makeup. No time to think. No time to panic. Maybe that was a good thing. Because if she had time, she would ask herself what she was doing. She would analyze. She would worry. She would find 1,000 reasons not to go. Exactly 10 minutes later, a black car stopped in front of her apartment building. Serena stepped outside. The back door opened, as if it had been waiting. She slid in, her heart in chaos, and there he was. Marcus sat inside. He wore a black shirt, sleeves rolled up. He looked nothing like the cold boss in a long coat from the stormy night. He looked more at ease, softer, and when his dark brown eyes found hers, they seemed warmer than ever. "You came," he said, and Serena could have sworn she heard a trace of relief in his voice. "You called," she answered, not knowing what else to say. Marcus smiled. That smile changed his face completely. "I want to show you something." The car glided into the night, past Manhattan streets blazing with light, past skyscrapers like giants standing guard over the city. Serena did not ask where they were going. Somehow, she trusted him in a way that made no sense. The car stopped in front of a towering building in the heart of the city. Marcus led her inside, into a private elevator, and they went up, and up, until the doors opened and Serena stopped breathing. They stood on an observation deck, maybe at the very top of the building. All of Manhattan spread beneath them like a carpet of shimmering light. Millions of little lights blinked and glimmered, reflected on the Hudson River, making a picture Serena had never dared to dream she would see. The night wind was cold and gentle as it slid through her hair. She stood there, stunned, forgetting how to speak. "This is where I come when I want to think," Marcus said, standing beside her, looking out over the city. "No one knows about this place. Only me. And now, her." They sat down on a long bench that was already there, and they began to talk. About everything. About what they had not had time to say at the diner. About dreams and fears. About the past and the future. Time passed. Serena did not know how long. An hour. 2 hours. Maybe more. She only knew she had never felt so comfortable beside anyone. At some point, Marcus spoke again. "You once said you wanted to open a bakery. Tell me about it." And Serena told him. She described the small bakery in her dreams. Rustic wooden tables. The smell of fresh hot bread. She talked about wanting orphan children to come eat for free, because she knew what hunger and loneliness felt like. She told him about the recipes she had learned from Mrs. Patterson. About a dream that had always seemed impossible. Marcus listened, and when she finished, his eyes brightened, as if he had just seen something precious. "You will do it," he said. His voice was steady, as if it were an obvious truth. "I believe that." And strangely, when Marcus said it, Serena began to believe it too. The second date came a week later. This time Marcus's message was a little longer. "Dress warm. I will pick you up at 7. Serena did not ask where they were going. She had learned that with Marcus, surprise was always worth more than waiting. She put on a cream-colored sweater, wrapped a scarf around her neck, and slipped on the leather gloves he had given her. When Marcus saw the gloves on her hands, a flicker of light crossed his dark brown eyes, and Serena knew she had done the right thing. The car carried them out of the city, deeper into the suburbs, where skyscrapers gave way to bare trees and fields covered in mist. At last, they stopped before a tall iron gate. Beyond it, a wide garden lay hidden in the night. Marcus led her through the gate, and Serena stepped into another world. "This is a private botanical garden," Marcus explained. "One of the city's best-kept secrets." A massive greenhouse stretched out in front of them, warm golden light spilling from inside like a glowing jewel in the winter darkness. When they stepped in, Serena nearly lost her breath. Flowers. Thousands of flowers. Every color, every kind. Blooming in defiance of the winter cold outside. White orchids. Deep red roses. Bright yellow tulips. Purple lavender. Their scents mingled, sweet and intoxicating, wrapping around her like warm arms. "It is beautiful," she whispered, unable to look away from the petals. Marcus stood beside her, silent, watching her reaction with an expression she could not read. Then he led her deeper into the garden, past rows of blooms, to a stone bench beneath an orange tree in flower. They sat down, and Marcus did something that surprised Serena. He pulled a notebook from the pocket of his coat. A worn, brown leather notebook. Old, the spine softened from use. He stared at it for a long moment, as if weighing a decision, then placed it in her hands. "Open it," he said, his voice lower than usual. Serena opened the notebook, and she stopped breathing. Drawings, dozens of them, in pencil and charcoal, delicate down to every line. A portrait of a woman with sorrowful eyes, a city skyline at sunset, 2 hands holding a rose, and more. Each one carried a classical style, the kind that reminded Serena of Renaissance masterpieces she had only ever seen in books. Soft lines, yet confident, perfect shadowing, emotion alive in every stroke. "You drew these?" she asked, lifting her gaze to Marcus, eyes wide. He nodded. And for the first time, Serena saw something like uncertainty on the face that was always so sure. "Since I was a boy, my mother taught me." She loved Renaissance painting, especially Michelangelo and Raphael. She said art is how the soul speaks when words are not enough. Serena turned page after page, taking in each sketch, and it felt like she was looking straight into Marcus's soul. This was not the cold mafia boss. This was an artist, a man with a sensitive heart and gifted hands, a part of him the outside world never got to see. "Why do you hide this?" she asked softly. "Why does no one know?" Marcus was quiet for a long time, his gaze drifting over the flowers around them. Then he answered, his voice low and heavy. "Because in my world, a man is not allowed to be weak," he said. "A mafia boss is not allowed to draw, not allowed to love beauty, not allowed to have any weakness an enemy can use. Since I was young, my father taught me that art was useless, a sign of weakness, so I hide it. I hide this notebook. I hide who I really am." Serena looked at him, and her heart ached. She saw the loneliness in his eyes, the weight of wearing a mask for an entire life, the real man behind the powerful boss. "Thank you," she said, her voice barely more than breath, "for showing me." Marcus turned to her, and in those dark brown eyes she saw something new. Gratitude, trust, and maybe, just maybe, something that looked like love beginning to take root. The third date came at 4 a.m. Marcus's message was only one line: "I want to show you the sunrise." Serena could not sleep that night. She lay on her bed, staring at the ceiling, counting each minute as it passed, until the familiar black car appeared beneath her apartment window. This time they went toward the harbor, where a white yacht was waiting, its lights shimmering on water as dark as ink. Marcus led her up onto the deck, where 2 lounge chairs sat side by side, facing east, toward the horizon where the sky was beginning to shift from black to gray. They sat in silence, waiting for the sun. The early morning air was cold and damp, carrying the scent of sea salt and shipwood. Serena pulled the wool blanket Marcus had already prepared up around her shoulders, and she felt an unexpected peace, as if she belonged here, as if she belonged to this moment, as if she belonged beside the man sitting next to her. Then Marcus spoke. "You know about me now," he said, his voice low and gentle in the stillness. "About my life, about what I hide. Now I want to know about you, about your childhood, about what made you who you are today." Serena went rigid. This was the part of her life she never told anyone, the part she had buried deep beneath a hard shell, beneath the customer service smile, beneath the daily endurance. But when she looked into Marcus's eyes that had already shown her his deepest secrets, she knew she could not refuse. "I do not know who my birth parents are," she began, her voice trembling. "I was left at the hospital the day I was born. No name, no address, nothing at all. The nurse on duty that night named me Serena because she said I did not cry. I just lay there, silent, as if I already knew no one was coming back for me." She paused, swallowing against the tightness in her throat. "In the years after that, I lived in orphanages. Not one, 5 different places. Every time I arrived somewhere new, I hoped someone would adopt me. And they did. 3 times. Marcus said nothing. He only reached for her hand. His hand was warm and steady, like an anchor keeping her from being pulled under by the current of painful memory. "The first family returned me after 2 months, Serena continued, her voice flat, as if she were reading someone else's story. "They said I was too quiet, too creepy. The second family kept me 6 months, until they had a biological child and did not need me anymore. And the third family..." She stopped, her breath heavy. "My foster father drank, and when he was drunk, he hit his wife. He hit me. I endured it for 18 months. until a teacher saw the bruises on my arm and called the police. I was 12 when they took me out of that house. Tears began to slide down Serena's cheeks, but she did not stop. She could not stop. Words that had been locked in her chest for too long poured out like a flood, beyond her control. After that, I did not trust anyone anymore. I built walls around myself. I became the child no one wanted to adopt because I was too cold, too distant, and I accepted that I would live like that forever, until Mrs. Patterson appeared. Her voice softened when she said the name. She was a widow, 60 years old, living alone in a small house in Queens. She did not need a child. She chose a child. She chose me, the child no one wanted. Serena turned to Marcus, eyes red. She taught me to bake. She taught me to read. She taught me that being loved was not something I had to earn, but something I was born with the right to receive. She held me every night until I fell asleep. She told me I love you every day, until I started to believe it. She cried, openly now, with no hiding and no restraint, and then she got sick. Cancer. I took care of her for 2 years, until her last breath, and when she was gone, I became an orphan again. Silence, only the soft slap of waves against the hull, and the early wind moving through the dark. Then Marcus spoke, his voice rough. You are the strongest person I have ever met, Serena. Serena shook her head. I am not strong. I just did not have a choice. That is exactly what strength is, Marcus said, squeezing her hand tighter. Getting back up when life knocks you down. Continuing to love after you have been hurt too many times. Continuing to hope when there is nothing left to hope for. And right then, the sun began to rise at the edge of the horizon, staining the whole sky red. Serena watched the sunrise, tears still on her cheeks, but her heart lighter than it had ever been. Because for the first time in her life, she had told someone the whole story. And that person did not run. That person was still here, holding her hand, watching a new day begin with her. The dates continued, each one drawing them closer. A private dinner in an Italian restaurant Marcus rented out entirely. An afternoon wandering through an art museum with no one else inside but the two of them. A night on the roof of the Valente estate, drinking wine and counting stars. Every moment, every conversation, every look they shared. All of it felt like invisible threads, weaving something Serena did not dare name. She was afraid. Afraid that if she said the word out loud, it would vanish. Afraid it was all a dream, and she would wake up in her cold studio apartment, alone the way she always was. But then that night came. Marcus picked her up at 9 in the evening, and this time he did not say where they were going. The car drove through the night, out of the city, along empty, winding roads that curved through the woods. At last they stopped beside a lake. The water was smooth as glass, reflecting the full moon and thousands of stars glittering in a cloudless sky. A small yacht waited by the shore, lanterns glowing along the railing, like a dream stepped out of a fairy tale. Marcus guided her aboard, and they drifted out into the middle of the lake, leaving the world behind. No traffic noise, no city lights, only them, the water, the moon, and the absolute silence of nature. Serena lay back on the deck, staring up at the night sky, and she felt impossibly small, small beneath the vast universe. But strangely, she did not feel alone. Because Marcus lay beside her, their shoulders touching, the warmth of his body reaching her like a promise. They were quiet, but it was not an awkward silence. It was the silence of two people who did not need words to understand each other. A quiet that felt comfortable, peaceful, as if they had known each other in another life. Then Marcus shifted, propping himself on one elbow, looking down at her. Moonlight softened the sharp angles of his face, making his dark brown eyes glow as if there were fire inside. I do not believe in love at first sight, he said, his voice low and light as the night wind. I used to think it was only a fairy tale, something people made up to sell books and movies. I lived 36 years without ever feeling something like this. Serena looked at him, her heart speeding up. And then, she whispered, and then what? Then that night happened, Marcus said, his eyes never leaving hers. The storm, the empty diner, and you. He paused, drawing in a deep breath, as if gathering courage. When I heard your voice on the phone, gentle and warm, telling me my daughter was safe, something changed in me. And when I saw you for the first time, standing in that small diner, hair wet, uniform old, but your eyes bright as if they held stars. He reached out, his fingers brushing her cheek. I understood. Understood what? Serena's voice trembled. That love at first sight is real, Marcus said, and it struck me. His hand lifted her chin, gentle but sure. His dark eyes searched hers, reading every feeling, every thought. every frantic beat of her heart, and Serena saw in his gaze the thing she had been too afraid to name. Love. Pure. Fierce. Terrifying in its wholeness. Serena. Marcus whispered her name, and on his lips it sounded like a prayer, like a hymn, like the most beautiful sound she had ever heard. Then he kissed her, not a soft, hesitant kiss. This was the kiss of a man who had waited too long, held back too much, wanted so badly it had almost hurt. His mouth met hers, warm and demanding, and everything exploded. Serena felt fireworks inside her chest, fire racing through her veins, as if the whole universe had narrowed to this one moment. Only this. Only them. Only their mouths moving together. She wrapped her arms around his neck, her fingers sliding into his black hair, and she kissed him back with everything she had, with the loneliness of 28 years, with the buried hunger to be loved, with a heart breaking open with happiness. When they finally pulled apart, they were both breathing hard, foreheads touching, their breath mixing. Marcus closed his eyes, and when he opened them again, something glittered in his dark brown gaze. Mia vita, he whispered in Italian, his voice rough. My life. Serena did not realize she was crying until she felt hot tears sliding down her cheeks. But these were not tears of sadness. These were the tears of someone who had finally found home. After that moonlit night on the lake, everything changed. Marcus stopped hiding Serena from his world. He wanted her to step into it. He wanted her to become part of his life, not only in secret dates, but in his home, in his family. And so, 1 week after their first kiss, he brought her to the Valente estate. Serena had imagined Marcus's house 100 different ways. She thought it would feel cold, lavish, full of guards and the tight, dangerous air of the underworld. But when the car passed through the large iron gates and rolled to a stop in front of the mansion, she was surprised. The house was enormous, yes, gray stone walls, an Italian red tile roof, but it was not cold. Vines climbed the fences, greenery filled the garden, warm yellow light spilled from the windows. It looked like a home, a real one. She had not even had time to step out of the car when the front door flew open. Sister Serena, Sophia burst out like a tiny tornado, black curls flying, little feet running so fast she almost tripped. She launched herself at Serena, wrapping her arms around Serena's waist, pressing her face into Serena's stomach. I missed you. I missed you so much. Why did it take you so long to come? Serena dropped to her knees, hugging the child, and her heart melted. Sophia was different from that stormy night. No more shaking, no more fear. She was bright with energy, wide brown eyes shining, cheeks rosy. Her grin so wide it showed the new gap where a baby tooth had fallen out. I missed you too, Serena whispered, smoothing those curls. How are you feeling? I am great. I drew so many pictures. I want to show you. And Papa said you will teach me how to bake. Is it true? Is it true? Marcus walked up beside them, a rare smile on his mouth as he looked at his daughter and Serena. You are going to squeeze Serena to death, Sophia. It is okay, Serena laughed as she stood, still holding Sophia's hand. I like this kind of greeting. They went inside, and Serena was introduced to Rosa, the housekeeper who had worked for the Valente family for 30 years. She was an Italian woman in her 60s, silver hair pinned neatly at the back of her head, a face lined with age, but eyes sharp and warm. When Rosa looked at Serena, there was no probing, no judgment, only acceptance, as if she had known about Serena for a long time, and had been waiting for her to arrive. So you are Serena, the one the boss and the little one have been talking about non-stop, Rosa said, her Italian accent thick. Welcome home. I hope you will stay a long time. That night's dinner was not a lavish feast. No long table piled with endless dishes. No servants standing around. Only the 4 of them in the large kitchen, with Marcus at the stove, cooking pasta from his mother's family recipe. Serena sat at the counter, Sophia beside her, and Rosa moved back and forth preparing salad and sauce. Papa cooks so well, Sophia bragged. But he only cooks when it is a special occasion. Today is special because you are here. Marcus looked back, his eyes finding Serena. He did not say a word, but the small smile on his mouth said everything. This is special. You are special. Dinner unfolded in laughter and conversation. Sophia talked about school, her friends, the drawing she was working on. Rosa told old stories about Marcus when he was a boy, making him grimace and making Serena laugh out loud. And Marcus, the cold Mafia boss, sat there with a smile that would not leave his face, watching his daughter and the woman beside him, with a look Serena had never seen on anyone, the look of a happy man. After dinner, Serena kept her promise. She taught Sophia how to make chocolate chip cookies, the recipe Mrs. Patterson had taught her years ago. They stood in the kitchen with flour flying everywhere, on their cheeks, in their hair, even on Sophia's nose. The little girl giggled when Serena dabbed flour on her nose, and she struck back by tossing a pinch of flour into Serena's hair. A flour fight erupted, and laughter echoed through the house, waking walls that had been silent for far too long. Marcus stood in the kitchen doorway, leaning against the frame, watching them. Rosa stood beside him, and she murmured, voice thick with emotion, "It has been a long time since this house has heard laughter like this, sir." When the cookies came out of the oven, Sophia pulled Serena upstairs to show her the collection of drawings. And there, on the wall, among dozens of crooked sketches, Serena saw one picture that was different. A drawing of 3 people, a tall man with black hair, a girl with brown hair, and a little girl in the middle, holding both their hands. Beneath the drawing, in a child's wobbly handwriting, were the words, "My family." Tears rose in Serena's eyes. "That is Papa," Sophia said, pointing at the man. "That is me," she pointed at the little girl. "And that is you," she pointed at the brown-haired woman. Then Sophia looked up at Serena, wide eyes full of hope. "Can you be my family?" Serena knelt down, hugged her, and whispered through tears, "I would love to, Sophia. I would love to." The weeks that followed passed like a dream. Serena still worked at the diner. She still served customers and wiped tables every day, but her life had changed completely. She had Marcus, the man who called every night before she fell asleep, his low, warm voice soothing her into rest. She had Sophia, the child who called her sister with pure joy every time they saw each other. She had a family, not official yet, but already more than anything she had ever dared to hope for. Then one morning, when she opened her mailbox the way she always did, Serena found an envelope from the hospital. Her hands shook as she tore it open, bracing herself for another demand letter, maybe with higher interest, maybe with harsher threats. But what she read made her read it 3 times, just to be sure her eyes were not lying. "Dear Miss Serena Hayes, we are writing to inform you that the remaining balance of $5,000 for the hospital charges related to patient Margaret Patterson has been paid in full. Your account now shows a 0 balance. Sincerely." Serena stood there in the hallway of her aging apartment building, staring at the paper. $5,000, the debt that had been crushing her for 2 years. The debt that had driven her to work 14 hours a day, skip breakfast, wear clothes worn thin to threads. It was gone, overnight, and she knew exactly who had done it. She went to the Valente estate that very afternoon. No warning, no waiting for a car to pick her up. She took a taxi with tip money she had saved, and when she walked through the gate, she did not smile at the guards the way she usually did. She went straight inside. She found Marcus in his office. He sat behind his desk, reviewing papers. When he saw her, he stood, a smile starting to form. But the smile vanished when he saw her face. "Serena, what is wrong? What did you do?" she cut in, her voice shaking with the effort to hold her emotions in. She held up the letter. "The debt. You paid my debt." Marcus was silent for a moment. Then he nodded. "Yes." "Why?" Her voice rose. "I did not ask you to do that. I do not need anyone to save me. I could handle it. I was." "You could handle it," Marcus interrupted, calm. "You worked yourself to exhaustion. You skipped meals to pay it down. You carried a debt that was not yours for 2 years. He stepped closer, dark brown eyes fixed on hers. "Do you know why I did it?" Serena shook her head, tears beginning to gather. "Because you took care of your foster mother until her last breath," Marcus said, his voice softening. "You stayed with her when no one else did. You loved her, worried over her, and you let her go with all the love a child can give a mother." He lifted his hand and wiped the tear sliding down Serena's cheek. "She deserved to rest without leaving a burden behind for you, and you deserve to live without carrying that burden." Something broke open in Serena. She cried. Not from anger, not because her pride had been wounded, but because for the first time in her life, someone had seen the pain she carried. Someone who did not just say "you poor thing" and walk away, but actually did something to help her. She fell into Marcus's arms, clinging to him, and she cried the way she had never let herself cry before. Marcus held her, one hand moving gently over her back, his lips pressing a kiss to the top of her head. "I am not buying you with money, Serena," he whispered. "I only want you to be free. Free from the past. Free to live, to dream, to love." They stood like that for a long time, and neither of them noticed someone watching from the doorway. Victor Valente, Marcus's brother, stood there with his arms folded across his chest. He was 32, 4 years younger than Marcus, with the same dark brown eyes, but a sharper, more guarded look. He had doubted Serena from the beginning. He had investigated her. He had warned his brother she might be a gold digger. But now, watching her cry in Marcus's arms, watching the tenderness on the face his brother rarely showed, Victor understood. He turned to Rosa, who stood nearby with wet eyes. "She is different," Victor said, his voice low. "She is real." Rosa nodded, smiling. "I told you so." A month had passed since the debt was paid. A month of family dinners. Afternoons teaching Sophia how to bake. Nights sitting beside Marcus on the balcony, looking down at a city made of glittering light. Serena still worked at the diner, not because she needed the money anymore, but because she loved the work. She loved Frank. She loved the familiar regulars. Marcus respected that. He never pushed her to change. He never tried to turn her into someone else. He loved her for who she was, not for who he wanted her to become, and that made Serena love him more every day. Then, one weekend afternoon, Marcus told her to dress up. "I want to take you somewhere special," he said. And in his dark brown eyes there was a light she had never seen before. Mystery, excitement, and something that looked a little like worry. Serena did not ask where they were going. She had learned that with Marcus, surprises were always worth more than waiting. The car carried them out of the city, deep into the suburbs, along winding roads through green hills. At last, they stopped in front of an old estate, smaller than the Manhattan house but beautiful in a different way. Antique, peaceful, like something lifted from a Victorian painting. "This is where I grew up," Marcus said, his voice softening. "The Valente family home for 4 generations. I left after I married Isabella, but I kept it, because this is where my mother is." He led Serena around to the back of the house, and Serena stopped breathing. In front of her was a rose garden, not a few small beds, an entire kingdom of roses stretching to the horizon. Thousands, maybe tens of thousands, in every color. Crimson red like blood, blush pink like a bride's cheek, bright yellow like sunlight, warm orange like sunset, and white, pure as the first snow. The fragrance wrapped around her, intoxicating and sweet, like nature's invisible embrace. "My mother planted this garden," Marcus said beside her. "One rose at a time. She said roses were the symbol of love, and every rose she planted was a prayer for our family." His voice dropped, heavy with longing. "She died when I was 20. Cancer, like your foster mother. But the garden is still here. I pay people to care for it, because I cannot let it die with her." Serena reached for Marcus's hand and squeezed gently. She understood. She understood the need to keep something of the dead, even if it was only an old coat or a garden of flowers. They walked between the rose beds as the late sun slanted low, turning the whole garden gold and amber. Marcus guided her to a special corner, where only white roses grew, clean and luminous. "This was my mother's favorite place," he said. "She said white roses meant new beginnings, hope, the purest kind of love." Serena bent down and breathed in a white rose in full bloom. Its scent was sweet and delicate. She closed her eyes and let the peace settle into her bones. "My mother would love you," Marcus said behind her, his voice full of feeling. "I know it. She would love your gentleness, your strength, the way you love Sophia, the way you changed my life." Serena smiled, eyes still closed. "I wish I could have met her." "You will," Marcus said, in a different way. Something in his voice made Serena open her eyes and turn around, and she stopped breathing. Marcus was down on one knee in front of her, in the white rose garden, under the golden light of sunset. In his hand was a small black velvet box, open, holding a ring, not a gaudy, showy diamond, but an oval emerald, green as her eyes, surrounded by small diamonds that caught the light. Subtle, elegant, perfect. Tears rose in Serena's eyes as she looked down at the man kneeling before her, sunset glinting off his dark hair touched with silver, and off his dark brown eyes shining. "Serena," Marcus said her name, his voice trembling for the first time since she had known him. Serena stood there in the white rose garden, under a sunset that was turning the whole world into a blaze of gold and amber, and she could not believe what she was seeing. Marcus Valente, the most powerful mafia boss in the city, the man who could make an empire tremble with a single look, was kneeling in front of her, one knee on the ground, the emerald ring glinting in his palm, and in those dark brown eyes, she saw something she had never believed she deserved. Love, pure, unconditional, and wholly meant for her. "Serena," Marcus said her name again, and on his lips it sounded like a hymn. "I lived 36 years in a world of shadows and power. I built an empire with iron and blood. I lost my wife, and I thought my heart died with her." His voice trembled slightly, and Serena could see him pouring all his courage into every word. "Then one stormy night, I got a call from a waitress in a small diner, a woman who saved my daughter, who spoke to me with gentleness and told me she was wrapped in the warmest coat you owned and drinking hot chocolate with marshmallows. A small smile touched his mouth, and in that moment, inside the storm, you walked into my life, and you became peace. Tears slid down Serena's cheeks, but she did not wipe them away. She only stood there, listening, her heart pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. You are not a princess in a castle, Marcus went on. You are a tired waitress after 14 hours on your feet, with shoes worn thin and a uniform faded old. But you have something no woman I have ever met has ever had. You have a heart big enough to gather up a lost child in the rain, strong enough to carry a debt for the foster mother you buried, brave enough to step into my world without fear. He paused, drew a breath, and when he continued, his voice caught. You brought laughter back to Sophia. She had not laughed like that since her mother died. But with you, she is a child again. Bright, happy, alive. You brought light back into the house. A house that had been silent and cold for 4 years is now full of laughter and the smell of baking and the warmth of love. And you, his voice broke. You brought the beat back to my heart. The heart I thought was dead. You woke it. You taught it how to love again. Marcus lifted the ring, the emerald catching the sunset, green as Serena's eyes, green as hope, as life, as love. I cannot promise you an easy life, he said. My world is dangerous. There are enemies, there are shadows, but I can promise you this. I will protect you with my life. I will love you with my whole heart. I will spend the rest of my life making you happy. He looked straight into her eyes, and the last question fell like a mountain, deep as the sea. Serena Hayes, will you be my wife? Serena did not answer with words. She dropped to her knees in front of Marcus, right there among the white roses, knees on the ground, hands closing over his. Tears poured like rain, but she was smiling, the brightest smile of her 28 years. Yes, she whispered, her voice broken. 1,000 times yes. 1,000,000 times yes. I want to. I want to be your wife. I want to be Sophia's mother. I want to be your family. Marcus's hands shook as he slid the ring onto her ring finger. It fit perfectly, as if it had been made for this finger, for this woman, for this moment. Then he pulled her into his arms, holding her tight, and kissed her in his mother's rose garden beneath a sunset fading into night. They held each other for a long time, foreheads touching, their breath blending, and the world around them seemed to stop turning. Only them, only love, only the promise of a shared future. Then a shriek burst from behind them. Did she say yes? Did she say yes? Serena and Marcus turned, and Serena saw Sophia running toward them, black curls flying, little feet moving so fast she nearly tripped. Behind her was Rosa, wiping tears with a handkerchief, and Victor, arms crossed, but his mouth curved in a smile. I promised to keep it a secret, but I could not, Sophia yelled as she barreled toward them like a whirlwind. Papa made me promise I would not come out here until it was done, but I could not wait. Did she say yes? Did she say yes? Marcus laughed, a sound bright and happy, the kind of sound Serena knew she would never tire of hearing. She said yes, my love. Sophia jumped up and down, then threw her arms around both of them. Small arms hooked around Serena's and Marcus's necks, pulling them together, and the little girl cried, happy tears sliding down her round cheeks. You are going to be my new mom, Sophia whispered, her voice shaking. I will have a mom. I will have a mom again. Serena held her tight, tears mixing. Yes, sweetheart. I will be your mother. Forever. And they held each other in the white rose garden, 3 people, 1 family, under the last dying light of sunset, as the first stars began to appear in the sky. The wedding took place 1 month after the proposal, right there in Marcus's mother's rose garden. It was not a lavish society wedding with hundreds of guests and hungry reporters. Serena did not want that. She wanted something small and warm, only the people who truly mattered, and Marcus agreed, because he would give her anything she asked for. The rose garden was dressed in white ribbons and thousands of tiny candles, glittering like falling stars in a sea of flowers. An arched floral gate woven from pure white roses stood at the front, where Marcus waited in a perfectly tailored black suit, his hands trembling slightly with nerves. There were only a few dozen guests. Rosa wore a deep blue dress, tears already shining before the ceremony even began. Victor stood beside his brother as best man, the cool hardness he usually carried replaced by a warm smile. Frank, the owner of the Moonlight Diner, sat in the front row, crying like rain from the moment he stepped into the garden. And Sophia, in a blush pink flower girl dress, curls tied with a white bow, stood at the head of the aisle with eyes bright as morning. The wedding music began, and everyone rose and turned toward the garden entrance. Serena appeared. Her wedding dress was white, simple, and elegant. Not a huge layered gown, but a long clean line that skimmed her figure, with delicate lace edging at the neckline and sleeves. Her chestnut brown hair was pinned up loosely, dotted with small white roses. She had no father to walk her down the aisle. She was used to that. But when she reached the garden gate, a small hand slipped into hers. Sophia stood there, looking up at her with shining eyes. "Can I walk Mom down?" the little girl asked. And Serena had to bite her lip to keep from crying right there. She nodded, and mother and daughter walked forward on a carpet of rose petals toward the man waiting at the end of the aisle. When Marcus saw her, everything he had been holding back all day finally broke open. Tears slid down the face of the most powerful mafia boss in the city. Not tears of sorrow, tears of a man who had finally found complete happiness. When Serena reached him, Marcus took her hand, and she could feel him trembling. They stood facing each other in his mother's rose garden, under golden sunset light, and they spoke their vows. Marcus vowed to protect her, to love her, to stand with her through every storm in life. Serena vowed to be his light, his peace, his home, and when the officiant declared them husband and wife, Marcus pulled her into his arms and kissed her to the sound of applause and happy crying all around them. The celebration afterward was a warm evening of laughter and stories. Rosa cooked traditional Italian dishes from the Valente family. Frank wrapped Serena in a hug and sobbed against her shoulder. "That girl deserves to be happy," he said, his voice thick. "From the day she walked into my diner, I knew she was special. And now, seeing her in a wedding dress, I know I was right." Sophia danced all night, dragging both Marcus and Serena into the dancing with her, her clear laughter ringing through the garden. Victor raised a glass to his brother, and for the first time he spoke to Serena with real sincerity. "Welcome to the Valente family, and thank you for bringing my brother back." Late at night, when the guests had gone and the house fell quiet, Marcus led Serena up to their room. The room was wide, with large windows looking out over the rose garden, where the candles still flickered in the dark. They stood on the balcony, shoulder to shoulder, gazing down at the place where they had just become husband and wife. The night air was cool, carrying the sweet scent of roses, and Serena rested her head on Marcus's shoulder, feeling his warmth spread into her. "Do you regret it?" Marcus asked, his voice low and soft in the silence. "Stepping into my world, becoming the wife of a mafia boss, taking on dangers that may come." Serena looked up at him, pale green eyes bright in the moonlight. "Not for a second," she said, steadier than she had ever been about anything. "I lived 28 years alone, lonely, lost, with no one. And then one stormy night, a little girl appeared at my diner door, and everything changed." She lifted her hand and gently touched his cheek. "You gave me a family. You gave me love. You gave me a home to belong to. I do not regret it. Not for 1 second. And I never will." Marcus kissed her, tender and deep, under moonlight and roses. And they stood there, two people who had found each other inside a storm, now welcoming peace together. That is how Serena Hayes, an orphaned waitress in a small diner, became Serena Valente. Not because of money or power, but because of love. A love that began with one small act of kindness in a storm, with an old coat wrapped around a trembling child, with a cup of hot chocolate topped with marshmallows, with a phone call that changed an entire life. This story reminds us that the greatest love sometimes begins in the smallest moments, that kindness is never wasted, that everyone deserves to be loved, no matter how painful the past has been. And that family is not only the people who share your blood, but also the people who choose to stay. If this story touched your heart, please tap the like button to support our channel. Do not forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you do not miss more moving stories every day. Share this video with the people you love so they can sink into beautiful stories of love and hope too. We would love to hear what you felt. What do you think of Serena and Marcus's story? Have you ever lived through a small moment that changed your whole life? Leave a comment below and share what is in your heart. We read every comment, and we value every word you share with us. We wish everyone watching this video good health, a joyful life, and peace and happiness every day. Thank you for being with us. Goodbye, and we will see you in the next video.